Now we're going to talk about Chapter 6, Legally Managing Property for HOS-265, Hospitality Law. The objectives of this chapter just to understand property, real property, personal property, the idea of purchasing, financing, leasing, and a little discussion on intellectual property rights. When we talk about property, we have two ways to look at it. One is real property, which is considered real estate, physical land and the permanently attached things. So we think about that in terms of, when we buy buildings, personally when we buy a house. If we have a restaurant, then we are, buying the restaurant, the land, all that is physically attached and permanently attached to that physical land. So that's real property. Personal property comes in two forms. It is tangible and considered tangible and intangible. But of course, by definition, they are not real property. We would consider that more encompassing of all property that is not real estate. So when we talk about tangible versus intangible, with tangible property, the definition in the book is, is there for you. But when you think about tangible, you think about something you can reach out and touch and physically possess. Intangible doesn't allow you that option. It can't necessarily be handled, but it does have value and is considered your property. Okay, so a lot of times when we think about intangible property, we think about copyrights, patents, trademarks, ideas, things like that can be considered one's own personal property. If you look on page 97, there's a little discussion there about, it's a little case study about Stanley Richards, who invented a seasoning salt that became widely used, and someone approached them about using the drawing of their logo pretty much, and how that is considered personal property of an intangible nature. So you also have to consider, when we're talking about property, both real and personal, the chattel and the fixture aspect of it. A lot of us probably never heard about the chattel, but that's personal property, both movable and immovable. That is not considered real property. Okay, and then fixtures, obviously we could probably figure out what that is, but it's become a part of the real property because the article is permanently attached. So it's like a physical, a fixture there. I'm not saying it's a lamp or curtains. It's an actual physical fixture to the real property. Okay, so let's look at scenario 6.1 here. And I made a little video of, or not a video, excuse me, but took this picture. If you're familiar with the upstate area of Central South Carolina, this is a restaurant called Rails 133. It's a little cafe right in downtown Central. But it helps illustrate what Analyze the Situation 6.1 on page 96 discusses. So when we look at that, we read through it, and I'll give you just a second to do that now. Go ahead and pause the video recording so that you can read it and then come right back to it. So if you look in the top left-hand corner about midway right here, I'm circling it with the cursor, you see a external window unit air conditioner. So we look at question number 1 about Mr. Stein, and it says, can Mr. Stein be permitted to take the air conditioner? Well, first we have to consider, is it real property or personal property? Okay, we have to consider what that means based on what we've just learned. Okay, by definition, if we look at real property versus permanent property, versus personal property, this is not the real estate. It would be considered personal property in my mind, and that of which is a tangible nature because I can reach out and touch it and feel it and grab it. So the question is, should you be permitted to take it? Okay, let's ask ourselves 2 other questions maybe before we answer that one. Would the air conditioner be considered real or personal property? We just answered that. In my mind, again, it would be considered personal property because it is not part of the real estate. It is not a permanent fixture. It is a window unit air conditioner which can be taken out from the window. And as should the air conditioner should have been mentioned in the contract. That's where we get down to the true importance of what it is. If Mr. Stein wanted to take this, it should have not been in the contract. If Mr. Greer, the purchaser, wanted it, it should have been in the contract. They should have talked about this beforehand. It's like so many other issues we run into, communication can solve most of them. But if it's not listed as an asset or listed as personal property that stays, then yes, Mr. Stein should have been able to take it. Think about it in terms of buying a house that has a refrigerator already in it. Typically it says the refrigerator comes with the house. That's in the listing or things like that. If that's the case and then the seller decides they want to take the fridge, that's not possible. They are in breach of contract. If you go walk through the house and you see all the furniture, you never discuss if the furniture is going to be involved in the sale, and then you buy the house and there's no furniture, the onus comes back to you to say, well, this was personal property that was intended to leave. Purchasing property can be a long process, whether it's buying, selling, or leasing. Can be physically demanding too, and well, legally demanding, but when we think about it from a restaurant side of things and what we do on the hospitality side, we're purchasing real property from purveyors, and that could be food, supplies, and or equipment. So we could be, buying the food to then turn around and resell. Supplies, we're using those in the function of food production, and then equipment is what we use to make the food. We also have the opportunity in some situations to buy and sell land or equipment for new locations. We may be moving to a bigger building and we're not taking the equipment with us, so we're selling the equipment, or like we had just discussed, we're selling the building with the equipment already intact. You can't sell real property without a title. Title verification is on the buyer. Loans require title search, cash payments, and buyer discretion. So when you look at that in the book, we realize that, again, real property is the physical real estate. Okay? I can't just go out and sell real estate that's not mine. I have to own the title to it. Right? Even if I still owe money on it, there is a title associated with it. That's why lawyers are always involved when it comes to the buying and selling of real estate. Deeds, insurance, you're going to need those, right? Those are obviously all very important. Purchasing personal property, more common than purchasing real property. We may only, purchase real property once in our life and live in that home forever, right? But we are consistently purchasing personal property. It's, documented by a bill of sale. A lot of times it's a receipt. The transfer of ownership is most of the time immediate, or could be on delivery. If I buy something from you that's personal property, we're usually switching hands there. Things that have made that so much easier are things like eBay and Craigslist. The transfer of ownership is pretty much immediate, and I'm purchasing property from you. Obviously, we always want to be wary of the potential for stolen property and warranties. Okay? Warranties, we need to make sure that we understand the fine print. And we also want to make sure that we're doing all that we can do to ensure that the property that we are buying and purchasing is not stolen. Last slide for this, we talk about leasing property. Leasing is a good option for a lot of people, especially when you're new into the industry. If you're looking to open up a building, a lot of times in certain areas, buildings aren't for sale. And the reason people like to lease them out is because that's a continued source of income that could vary year to year, or within the contract, month to month, quarter to quarter, whatever it might be, to be more beneficial to the leaser. So make sure you understand the essentials that are in the contract: the length, rent amount, all the tenants' rights. If you can sublease it out, I leased this building but I don't need it, so I'm going to lease it out to someone else. Okay, make sure you understand the insurance requirements that go to that. Leasees, make sure we understand representation, what are covered expenses, and the renewal terms. We don't want to be halfway through the term and say, oh, well, we've got a better leasee coming in, so we're going to null and void your contract. We want to make sure what's in there in terms of my rights, what renewal terms there are. If we're investing a lot of time and effort into a building with only 1 year, term, and we're not guaranteed the opportunity to be able to get back in this building, we may want to consider something else. And as you're reading through the chapter and following along, if you look over on page 109, there's a good little comparison there of the pros and cons of considering buying versus leasing. And I think that there's 7 key points there that are really good to help, hopefully help you navigate and make that decision.